The napkin trembled in Rose's fingers as she wrote the words that could destroy her or save hundreds of lives. Through the kitchen window, she watched the mysterious drifter at table 17 cut into his $60 steak, unaware that the meat on his plate carried more than just seasoning. Manager Finch's shadow fell across her station, his whispered threat still burning in her ears. "One word to anyone, and your brother dies waiting for that surgery." But something about this stranger's eyes, the way they saw through everything, made her risk it all. She folded the napkin once, twice, her entire future compressed into a small white square. "Welcome to a story where courage comes from the most unexpected places. I'm taking you inside one of New York's most exclusive steakhouses, where a billionaire's test of character becomes a fight for survival. Stay with me until the end and let me know in the comments what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel." The November rain hammered Manhattan's streets like bullets of ice, each drop exploding against the pavement in tiny bursts of silver. Ethan Blackwell stood across from his own creation, the sterling cut, watching the warm amber light spill from its windows onto the wet concrete. $20 million he'd invested in this place. $20 million to build what food critics called the Cathedral of Carnivorous Excellence. Yet standing there in his torn military surplus jacket, 3-day stubble rough against his collar, nobody would guess he owned the air they were breathing. The doorman Marcus didn't recognize him. Good. That was the point. "Kitchen entrance is around back," Marcus said, his breath clouding in the cold air. The man's fingers drummed against his thigh, the same nervous tick Ethan had noticed during the hiring interview 2 years ago. "If you're looking for work." Ethan pulled the jacket tighter, letting rain drip from the brim of his weathered baseball cap. "Looking for dinner, actually." Marcus's expression shifted through several variations of disbelief before settling on professional dismissal. "Sir, perhaps I could recommend there's a diner 3 blocks down. Excellent coffee. Very accommodating prices. I've got money." "I'm sure you do, sir, but the sterling cut has certain standards." The word standards hung between them like a challenge. Ethan reached into his pocket, fingers finding the roll of hundreds he'd prepared for this moment. He peeled off 3 bills, letting Marcus see the rest of the roll, before pocketing it again. "Will this meet your standards?" Marcus's Adam's apple bobbed once, twice. His hand reached for the radio at his hip, hesitated, then fell back to his side. "One moment, sir." The heavy oak door swung open, releasing a wave of warmth that carried the scent of aged beef and rosemary. Ethan stepped inside, water pooling beneath his boots on the Italian marble he'd personally selected from a quarry outside Carrara. The hostess, a young woman whose name tag read Stephanie, looked him up and down with the kind of practiced disdain that cost extra to train into employees. "Table for 1, Ethan said. "Do you have a reservation?" "No." "I'm afraid we're fully booked for the next." "Check again." He slid another 100 across the hostess stand. Stephanie's manicured fingers made the bill disappear with impressive speed. "It seems we've had a cancellation. Follow me." She led him through the main dining room, past tables where investment bankers dissected merger deals over Wagyu, where pharmaceutical executives toasted FDA approvals with champagne that cost more than most people's rent. Nobody looked at him directly, but Ethan felt their awareness like static electricity. He was an anomaly in their carefully curated world, a reminder that chaos could still slip through the cracks. Stephanie seated him at table 17, the worst table in the house, crammed between the kitchen door and the service station. Ethan had specifically designed it to be terrible, a psychological punishment for customers who'd offended the staff. The constant traffic, the clatter of dishes, the harsh fluorescent spill from the kitchen. It was restaurant purgatory. "Your server will be with you shortly," Stephanie said, already retreating. Ethan settled into the chair, its leather still stiff and unforgiving, a deliberate choice to encourage quick turnover at undesirable tables. Through the porthole window in the kitchen door, he could see his executive chef Anton orchestrating the dinner service like a conductor before a symphony. Anton's knife work was poetry, his plating pure art. The man had earned 3 Michelin stars at his previous restaurant, and Ethan had paid a fortune to steal him away. But it wasn't Anton he was here to test. The kitchen door swung open and she appeared. Rose Vance moved like she was apologizing for the space she occupied. Shoulders curved inward, steps careful and measured. Her server's uniform was impeccable, pressed black pants, crisp white shirt. But Ethan's trained eye caught the details others would miss. The shoes were expensive, once now worn down at the heels. The watch on her wrist was a cheap replacement for something better. He could see the tan line from a larger face. Her honey-colored hair was pulled back in a bun that looked professional from the front, but was coming loose at the back, small wisps, escaping like thoughts she couldn't quite contain. "Good evening," she said, and her voice carried a quality Ethan hadn't heard in years, genuine warmth undermined by exhaustion. "I'm Rose. I'll be taking care of you tonight. Taking care of you, not serving you." The distinction mattered. "Evening," Ethan replied, deliberately roughening his voice. Rose set down a leather-bound menu and a wine list thick as a phone book. Her hands, he noticed, trembled slightly. Not from nervousness, the movement was too rhythmic. Low blood sugar, maybe, or medication side effects. "Can I start you with something to drink?" "We have an excellent selection of water's fine, still or sparkling, tap." She blinked once, a tiny fracture in her service mask. Nobody at the Sterling Cut ordered tap water. It wasn't even officially available. The menu listed only imported bottles with prices that would make most people gasp. I'll see what I can do," she said. As she turned to leave, Ethan caught her elbow gently, barely a touch, but she froze like he'd pulled a gun. "You okay?" he asked. The question seemed to confuse her more than his appearance had confused Marcus. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. Yes. Thank you for asking." "You sure?" For a moment something flickered in her green eyes, a depth of pain so raw it made Ethan's chest tighten. Then the service mask snapped back into place. "Perfectly fine, sir. I'll get that water." She disappeared through the kitchen door, and Ethan opened the menu, though he knew every item by memory. He'd approved each dish selected, every supplier tasted every sauce. The prices were obscene, deliberately so. The Sterling Cut wasn't selling food. It was selling exclusivity, the promise that you could afford what others couldn't. Through the kitchen porthole, he watched Rose at the service station. Gregory Finch, the night manager, had cornered her against the coffee machine. Ethan couldn't hear the words, but he could read the body language. Finch leaning in too close, Rose shrinking back, her hands clasped in front of her like a shield. Finch's finger jabbed the air inches from her face, and Rose nodded rapidly, repeatedly, the way people do when they're trying to make something stop. Interesting. Ethan had hired Finch 8 months ago on the recommendation of his CFO. The man's resume was flawless, 15 years, managing high-end establishments, glowing references, and MBA from Wharton. But resumes didn't show character, and character was what Ethan had come to test. Rose returned with his water in a crystal glass, not the paper cup tap water would normally warrant. She'd found a way to maintain his dignity while following his request. Clever. "Have you decided?" she asked. "What's good here?" "Everything, sir. Our chef is no. Ethan set down the menu. What's actually good? What would you order if you were spending your own money? Rose's fingers tightened on her order pad. I don't think I'm supposed to. I'm asking. She glanced toward the kitchen where Finch was no longer visible. The ribeye, she said quietly. Dry-aged 30 days. It's transcendent. Transcendent. Ethan smiled, the first genuine expression he'd allowed himself. That's a hell of a word for a piece of meat. It's a hell of a piece of meat. How much? $60. For transcendence sounds like a bargain. He handed her the menu. Medium rare. And wine what goes with transcendence. The 2015 Camus Cabernet. But it's, how much? Well, $300 a bottle. Ethan pulled out his roll of bills, making sure she saw it. Better make it 2 bottles then. Rose's pen hovered over her pad. Sir, I should mention that's nearly $700 for one meal. Is that a problem? No, I want to make sure you're aware. I'm aware. She started to leave, stopped, turned back. Why are you here? The question caught Ethan off guard. What do you mean? You could be eating anywhere. There's a dozen places within walking distance that would be more comfortable for you. Maybe I like being uncomfortable. Rose studied him for a long moment. Nobody likes being uncomfortable. They just get used to it. She walked away before he could respond, leaving Ethan with the unsettling feeling that he'd been the one being tested. The kitchen door burst open, and Finch emerged like a shark sensing blood. His suit was expensive but worn badly, too tight in the shoulders, too long in the sleeves, like he was wearing a costume of success that didn't quite fit. His hair was slicked back with enough product to shellac furniture, and his smile had the practiced warmth of a mortician. Good evening, sir, Finch said, sliding into Rose's section with territorial confidence. I'm Gregory Finch, night manager. I understand you've ordered quite an extensive meal. That a problem? Not at all. However, it is house policy to ensure payment capability for orders exceeding $500. Finch's smile widened, showing too many teeth. I'm sure you understand. Ethan pulled out his roll again, slower this time, letting Finch see the full thickness. This enough capability for you? Finch's eyes tracked the money like a predator watching prey. More than sufficient, sir. Enjoy your meal. But he didn't leave. Instead, he positioned himself at the service station, where he could watch table 17, arms crossed, waiting for something. Ethan wasn't sure what, but he recognized the posture of a man looking for an excuse. Rose returned with the wine, and her hands shook worse than before. She'd seen Finch watching. The cork came out clean, but when she poured, a drop splashed onto the white tablecloth, spreading like a bloodstain. I'm so sorry, she breathed, grabbing a napkin. It's fine. No, I'll get Finch, Hey. Ethan caught her wrist as she dabbed frantically at the stain. Her pulse hammered against his fingers like a trapped bird. It's fine. Just wine. You don't understand. She stopped herself, pulled her hand free. Your steak will be out shortly. She fled back to the kitchen, and Ethan saw Finch follow her, with his eyes marking her mistake in some mental ledger. The man's expression reminded Ethan of his father, the way he'd cataloged every failure, every disappointment, saving them up like ammunition for future warfare. Ethan sipped his wine. It was excellent, of course, hand-selected from his own collection, and watched the restaurant operate around him. The other servers moved with choreographed precision, but they gave table 17 a wide berth like it was contaminated. Only Rose had to brave that space, and each time she emerged from the kitchen, she looked a little more haunted. 20 minutes passed. 30. No steak. Rose appeared again, practically running. I'm so sorry for the delay. There's been The kitchen's... She stopped, reorganized her words. Your meal will be out momentarily. No rush. But you've been waiting. I've got wine and a warm place to sit. More than a lot of people have tonight. Something in his tone made her pause. She looked at him, and for a second her mask slipped completely. You're not what I expected, she said. What did you expect? I don't know, but not kindness. Maybe you're not looking in the right places. Or maybe kindness doesn't come to places like this. She caught herself, eyes widening. I didn't mean... You did. And you're probably right. The kitchen door slammed open. Anton himself emerged carrying Ethan's plate like a religious offering. The executive chef never delivered food. It was beneath his station, but there he was, face flushed with anger or embarrassment. Your ribeye, sir, Anton said in his thick French accent. My apologies for the delay. The steak was perfect, of course it was. Anton didn't know how to cook any other way. The meat glistened under the soft lights, juices pooling on the warm plate, accompanied by roasted vegetables that looked like jewels. The smell alone was worth the $60. Looks good, Ethan said. Anton lingered, clearly expecting more enthusiasm. When none came, he retreated with wounded dignity, shooting a venomous look at Rose as he passed. I should let you eat, Rose said. Stay. I have other tables. No, you don't. It was true. The restaurant was full, but Rose had been assigned only table 17. Another small cruelty in a system built on them. Finch wants me to. Finch wants a lot of things. Doesn't mean he gets them. Rose glanced toward the service station. Finch had disappeared, probably to terrorize someone in the kitchen. She pulled out the chair across from Ethan and sat not completely as perched on the edge like she might need to run. You're going to get me fired, she said. Would that be such a bad thing? Yes, and the word came out sharp, desperate. You don't understand. I need this job. Everybody needs their job. No, She stopped, pressing her palms flat against the table. My brother. He's sick. Really sick. The insurance here is the only reason he's getting treatment. Ethan cut into his steak. It was as promised, transcendent. What's wrong with him? Kidney failure. He needs a transplant, but the wait list. And the anti-rejection drugs after. She shook her head. I'm sorry. You don't need to hear this. Maybe I do. Why? Because nobody else seems to. He took another bite. How long has Finch been making your life hell? Rose went very still. I don't know what you mean. Sure you do. I saw him corner you by the coffee machine. Saw how you react when he's watching. So how long? Since I started. 6 months ago. Why you? Because I can't afford to fight back. The words came out in a rush like water through a broken dam. He knows about Marcus, my brother. Knows I can't risk losing the insurance. So when he needs someone to blame for shortages, it's me. When he needs someone to cover his shifts so he can leave early, it's me. When he needs... She stopped abruptly, face flushing. When he needs what? Nothing. I shouldn't be. She started to stand. Rose. Ethan's voice was quiet but firm. When he needs what? She sank back down. There's something wrong here. With the restaurant. Not the staff, they're good people. But Finch. He's doing something. I don't know what exactly, but supplies go missing. Money doesn't add up. And sometimes late at night there are deliveries that don't go through proper channels. You've seen this en coin. Some. Not enough to prove anything. And even if I could, she gestured helplessly. Who'd believe me? I'm nobody. Just a waitress who needs her job too much to cause trouble. Ethan set down his fork. What if someone did believe you? Then they'd be stupid. Finch has connections. Protection. The owner doesn't care as long as the place makes money. You sure about that? About the owner not caring. Rich people never care about anything but getting richer. The words stung more than Ethan expected. He'd built the sterling cut to be something special, something meaningful. But sitting here seeing it through Rose's eyes, he wondered if he'd just built another monument to his own ego. Maybe some of them care, he said. Maybe, but they never come down from their towers long enough to notice when they're needed. Before Ethan could respond, the lights flickered. Once, twice, then steady again. Rose went pale. Oh no. What? That's the signal. Finch uses it when... She stood quickly, knocking over her chair. I have to go, Rose, please, just finish your meal, pay your check, and forget we talked. She practically ran toward the kitchen, leaving Ethan alone with his transcendent steak that suddenly tasted like ash. Through the porthole, he could see movement shadows, gesturing violently, voices raised but muffled by the door's thickness. A younger server Ethan didn't recognize approached his table. Her name tag read Amanda, and her face was carefully blank. How is everything, sir? Where's Rose? She's been reassigned. I'll be finishing your service tonight. Reassigned where? Amanda's composure cracked slightly. I wouldn't know, sir. Ethan stood, pulling out his money roll. The check. But you haven't finished. The check, now. Amanda retreated, returned with the leather folder. Ethan dropped $1,000 on the table, enough to cover the meal and a tip that would be talked about for weeks. Keep the change, he said. Sir, this is... But Ethan was already moving, heading not for the exit, but toward the kitchen. Amanda called after him something about customers not being allowed, but he pushed through the door anyway. The kitchen was chaos, organized chaos, but chaos nonetheless. Steam rose from a dozen pans, flames leaped from grills, orders barked in 3 languages. Nobody noticed one more body in the maze of stainless steel and fire. Ethan found them in the back office, a cramped room that smelled of grease and disappointment. Finch had Rose backed against a filing cabinet, not touching her, but close enough that she couldn't move without making contact. Think you're smart, Finch was saying. Talking to customers, spreading lies. I didn't... Shut up. His hand slammed the cabinet beside her head, and Rose flinched. You know what I can do. 1 phone call to insurance. 1 word to the review board about inconsistencies in your brother's paperwork. Please, you want to keep your brother alive, then you do exactly what I tell you. Starting with backing the hell off. Both heads snapped toward Ethan. Finch's face cycled through surprise, anger, and finally settled on contemptuous amusement. The vagrant. Lost are we kitchens off limits to customers. So's threatening your staff, I'd imagine. This is a private conversation. Not anymore. Finch straightened his tie, a gesture meant to remind everyone who had the authority here. I'll call security. Do it. Something in Ethan's tone made Finch hesitate. Rich people didn't usually sound so unbothered by threats. They blustered, negotiated through money at problems. They didn't stand in dirty back offices staring down middle managers like they had all the time in the world. Who are you? Finch asked. Someone who's very interested in what you're doing here. I'm managing a restaurant. Is that what you call it? Ethan pulled out his phone, not the latest model, but expensive enough to suggest means. Because from where I'm standing, it looks more like extortion, maybe fraud, definitely some health code violations. Finch's face darkened. You don't know anything. I know you're skimming from the supply budget. I know you're running deliveries off the books. I know you've got something on half your staff to keep them quiet. Ethan was guessing on most of it, but Finch's expression confirmed he was close enough. Question is, how deep does it go? You're nobody. A bum with a lucky lottery ticket. Maybe. But I'm a bum with a phone and a real interesting story to tell. How long you think this place stays open once health inspectors start looking into those off-book deliveries, once insurance companies start investigating fraudulent claims? You're bluffing. Only one way to find out. They stared at each other for a long moment. Finally, Finch stepped back from Rose, who immediately slid sideways, putting distance between them. Get out, Finch said. Both of you. Rose, you're done for the night. Come back tomorrow and we'll discuss your future here. She's not coming back tomorrow, Ethan said. That's not your decision. It's not yours either. Finch laughed, an ugly sound like breaking glass. I'm the night manager. And I'm curious what the owner would think about his night manager running side businesses out of his kitchen. The owner doesn't give a damn as long as the numbers add up. You sure about that? Completely. Ethan smiled, then the kind of smile that had made board members nervous for 15 years. Interesting theory. Let's test it. He pulled out his phone again, scrolled through his contacts, found the number labeled simply office. What are you doing? Finch asked. Calling the owner. You don't know the owner. Gregory Finch, Ethan said, reading from his phone's screen. Hired 8 months ago. Previous experience includes the Madison Club Chez Laurent and supposedly La Bernardin, though that's a lie, you were fired from there for stealing one. MBA from Wharton, if we're counting online degrees. Divorced twice, currently behind on child support. Living in a one-bedroom in Queens despite pulling down 6 figures here. He looked up. Should I continue? Finch had gone the color of spoiled milk. How do you? I make it my business to know things. Ethan turned to Rose. Get your stuff. You're leaving. I can't at my job. You'll have a job tomorrow. A better one, I promise. You can't promise that. I can actually. He hit the call button on his phone. It rang twice before a familiar voice answered. Sterling Cut, how may I direct your call? Put me through to ownership, Ethan said. I'm sorry, sir, but tell them Ethan Blackwell is calling. The line went quiet, except for hold music Vivaldi, because Ethan had always hated it and wanted to remind himself not to keep people waiting. Finch's expression had shifted from confusion to dawning horror. You're not, he said. I am. But you look like someone you'd send to eat at the worst table in my own restaurant. Ethan's voice carried years of suppressed anger. Like someone you'd threaten and cheat and abuse because you thought nobody was watching. The hold music cut off. Mr. Blackwell. The voice belonged to Harrison, his CFO. Is everything all right? We weren't expecting. Harrison. Good. I need you and security at the Sterling Cut in 20 minutes. We have a situation with the night manager. Sir, embezzlement for starters. Probably more. Bring the forensic accountants. Yes, sir. Should I contact law enforcement? Ethan looked at Finch, who had somehow gotten smaller, collapsing in on himself like a dying star. Not yet, but have them on standby. He ended the call. The office was silent except for the distant clatter of the kitchen. Rose stood frozen against the wall, eyes wide with shock. Finch slumped into a chair, head in his hands. You set me up, Finch said. No, you set yourself up. I just wanted a steak. What happens now? Now you sit here and wait for security. You'll turn over everything, every doctored invoice, every off-book delivery, every contact in your supply chain scam. If you cooperate fully, maybe you just get fired instead of arrested. And if I don't, then I make it my personal mission to ensure you never work in this industry again. And trust me, I have the resources to make that promise stick. Finch looked up, and for a moment Ethan saw past the greed and cruelty to the desperate man underneath, drowning in debt, in failed expectations, in the gap between who he'd wanted to be and who he'd become. It almost made Ethan feel sorry for him. Almost. "The girl knows nothing," Finch said quietly. "Whatever you think she was part of, I know exactly what she was part of. She was your victim." Ethan turned to Rose. "Come on, we're leaving." "But now." He led her out through the kitchen, past the confused line cooks and prep staff, past Anton, who stood slack-jawed with a ladle dripping bechamel, out into the alley, behind the restaurant, where the rain had turned to snow, fat, wet flakes that stuck to everything they touched. Rose wrapped her arms around herself, shivering in her server's uniform. "I don't understand what just happened." "You stood up to a bully." "No, I didn't. I never said anything." "You were going to. I could see it in your eyes. And that took courage." "Courage?" She laughed bitterly. "I was terrified." "Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing the right thing despite it." A black town car pulled into the alley, Harrison right on time. The CFO stepped out immaculate despite the hour and weather. "Mr. Blackwell, the security team is pulling up now." "Good. Finch is in the back office. Process him quietly. I don't want to disturb the dinner service more than necessary." "Understood." Harrison's eyes flicked to Rose. "And this is Rose Vance. She's been instrumental in uncovering Finch's operation." Rose started to protest, but Ethan held up a hand. "Harrison, I want you to personally ensure Ms. Vance's employment record is spotless. Full severance package, glowing recommendations, and continuation of health benefits through end of year." "Sir, that's quite generous for a server who's been here only 6 months." "She's not a server anymore." Ethan turned to Rose. "I'm offering you a position in our corporate office, guest relations oversight. You'll be responsible for ensuring our restaurants maintain the highest standards of both service and ethics. The salary is triple what you're making now with full benefits, including comprehensive coverage for family members." Rose's mouth opened, closed, opened again. I don't have any experience in corporate." "You have something more valuable. You understand what it's like to be powerless in a system designed to exploit you. That perspective is worth more than a dozen MBAs. This is insane. This is opportunity. But why would you do this for me?" Ethan looked back at the sterling cut, at the warm light spilling from windows he'd once been so proud of. "Because someone should have done it a long time ago. And because I built this place to mean something, to be something special. But somewhere along the way, I forgot that restaurants aren't made special by their marble or their wine lists. They're made special by people like you, people who care even when caring costs them everything." Rose was crying now, tears mixing with snowflakes on her cheeks. "My brother will have the best care money can buy. Harrison will set up a medical trust tomorrow." "I can't accept this. It's too much." "Then earn it. Help me fix what's broken here. Help me build something that actually deserves to be called excellent." She wiped her eyes, smearing mascara. "What if I fail?" "Then you'll fail trying to do something good. That's more than most people can say." Before Rose could respond, security vehicles pulled into the alley, 3 black SUVs with discreet corporate logos. Men in dark suits emerged, moving with professional efficiency toward the restaurant's back entrance. "I should go," Rose said. Harrison will drive you home. What about you? Ethan pulled his weathered jacket tighter. I think I'll walk. I need to think. In the snow. Best time for it. Clears the head. Rose stepped forward, hesitated, then hugged him quick and fierce like she was afraid he might disappear. Thank you, she whispered, for seeing me, for seeing all of it. Thank you, he replied, for reminding me why I built this place to begin with. She pulled away, embarrassed by her boldness. Harrison opened the town car's door for her, and she slipped inside. As the car pulled away, Ethan saw her looking back through the rear window, still trying to process how her worst night had become her best. The snow was falling harder now, covering the city's sins in temporary white. Ethan started walking, no particular destination in mind. His phone buzzed, Harrison probably with updates about Finch. He ignored it. Tomorrow there would be lawyers and accountants and damage control. Tomorrow there would be hard questions about how he'd let his dream become corrupted. But tonight there was just snow and silence and the memory of Rose's courage, not the grand gesture she'd made, but the small one. The choice to keep caring in a place designed to punish care. The decision to remain kind when cruelty would have been easier. He'd come to the Sterling Cut looking for dishonesty, for confirmation that his cynicism about humanity was justified. Instead, he'd found something he'd thought no longer existed: genuine goodness, surviving in hostile soil. The napkin was in his pocket. He didn't remember picking it up, but there it was, slightly damp from his wet jacket, Rose's handwriting, barely visible in the dim streetlight. She must have written it while he was dealing with Finch, slipped it onto his table in those final chaotic moments. Thank you for being exactly who you are. 5 words that worth more than his entire fortune. Ethan Blackwell, billionaire restaurateur, owner of 17 high-end establishments across 3 continents, walked through the snowy streets of Manhattan with a used napkin in his pocket and tears on his face. He'd built an empire on the principle that everyone had a price, that loyalty was just a matter of negotiation, that kindness was weakness disguised as virtue. Rose Vance, a waitress who couldn't afford new shoes, had just proved him wrong on all counts. The Sterling Cut would survive the scandal. Finch would be prosecuted or not, depending on how cooperative he felt. The restaurant would continue serving transcendent steaks to people who could afford transcendence. But things would be different now. Rose would make sure of that. She'd stand in corporate meetings and ask uncomfortable questions. She'd review policies with the eye of someone who'd suffered under them. She'd remind everyone, including Ethan, that excellence without empathy was just another form of cruelty. His phone rang again. This time he answered. "Mr. Blackwell," Harrison said, "we've found some disturbing things in Finch's office. This goes deeper than just embezzlement." "How deep?" "He's been substituting inferior meat products and pocketing the difference. But sir, some of these suppliers, they're not certified. There could be serious health implications." Ethan stopped walking. Around him, the city continued its relentless motion taxis, honking people, hurrying home, life grinding forward. But in his mind, he saw Rose's face when she talked about the off-book deliveries, the fear mixed with determination. She'd known. Somehow she'd known it was worse than just money. "Shut it down," he said. "Sir, the restaurant. Shut it down tonight. Full evacuation, cite a gas leak or something. I want every piece of meat tested, every supplier verified. Nobody eats anything from that kitchen until we know it's safe. That will cost, I don't care what it costs. The media will have a field day. Let them. Better a scandal than someone getting sick, or worse." There was a pause. "What about Ms. Vance? The media will try to find angles, and a server promoted to corporate overnight. Ms. Vance is off limits. Make that crystal clear to our PR team. Her name stays out of this. Understood. And Mr. Blackwell. The other restaurants, should we audit them as well? Ethan closed his eyes. 17 restaurants. 17 potential Finches, 17 potential dangers he'd been too distant to see. All of them, he said. Every single one. And Harrison, I want someone like Rose at each location. Someone from the trenches, someone who understands what really goes on. When management isn't watching. That's unconventional. Conventional got us here. He ended the call and resumed walking. The snow had covered his footprints from just minutes ago, erasing his path like it had never existed. But Rose's note was still in his pocket, her words burned into his memory, her courage lighting a path forward he hadn't known he'd been searching for. Somewhere in the city, she was probably telling her brother the good news about the job, the insurance, the future that had suddenly opened up before them. She probably thought she owed him everything that he'd saved her. She had it backwards. Ethan Blackwell had walked into his restaurant, a bitter man testing humanity's worst impulses. He'd found them certainly in Finch's greed, in the system's casual cruelties, in his own blind spots. But he'd also found Rose Vance. And in finding her, he'd found something in himself he'd thought was lost, the ability to see people really see them beyond their utility or threat level. The capacity to care about something more than profit margins and market share. The snow kept falling, covering the city in possibility. Tomorrow would bring chaos, health inspectors, lawyers, media scrutiny. His empire would shake, maybe even crack. But it wouldn't fall. Because now he had Rose and others like her, people who knew what it meant to struggle, to sacrifice, to maintain dignity in undignified circumstances. They would help him rebuild not just the sterling cut, but his entire vision of what a restaurant could be. A place where excellence included empathy, where service meant serving everyone, not just the wealthy, where a waitress with worn shoes could speak truth to power and be heard. The city stretched out before him, lights blurring through the snow. Ethan Blackwell walked on a billionaire in a borrowed jacket, carrying a napkin worth more than gold, finally understanding that the test he'd designed had never been about catching dishonesty. It had been about discovering grace. And in Rose Vance, brave, terrified, transcendent Rose, he'd found it. The morning after the incident at the Sterling Cut arrived with brutal clarity, the kind of harsh winter light that exposed every flaw the darkness had hidden. Rose Vance stood outside the gleaming tower that housed Blackwell Enterprises, her reflection in the glass doors showing a woman she barely recognized. The same worn shoes, yes, but Harrison's assistant had delivered a suit to her apartment at 6 a.m. Charcoal gray, perfectly tailored, with a note that simply read, "For your first day, E.B." Her brother Marcus had cried when she told him about the job, about the medical trust, about everything changing overnight. He'd grabbed her hands with what little strength he had left and whispered, "What did you do, Rosie? Rob a bank?" She'd laughed through her tears and said, "No, Mark, I just served a steak to the right person." But now standing here with security guards eyeing her suspiciously. Despite her new clothes, Rose wondered if she'd made a terrible mistake. The corporate world wasn't her world. She belonged in restaurants, taking orders, not giving them. What did she know about oversight and ethics and whatever else Ethan Blackwell expected from her? The glass doors swooshed open, and Harrison appeared immaculate as always. "Ms. Vance, Mr. Blackwell is waiting." The elevator rose 37 floors in absolute silence. Rose counted each one, her stomach dropping a little more with every number that lit up. When the doors finally opened, she stepped into a world of marble and mahogany, of paintings that probably cost more than houses, of windows that turned Manhattan into a personal snow globe. Ethan's office occupied the entire north corner of the floor. She found him standing at the window, still wearing the same clothes from last night. The worn jacket, the old jeans, the broken-in boots. He hadn't slept. She could tell by the way he held his shoulders, the careful control of someone running on willpower alone. The health department shut down 3 more restaurants, he said without turning around. The contamination was worse than we thought. Finch had deals with suppliers in 4 states. We're looking at potential criminal charges, civil lawsuits, complete brand destruction. I'm sorry, Rose said, though she wasn't sure what she was apologizing for. Don't be. You tried to warn me. That napkin you were writing, you were going to tell me everything, weren't you? Rose moved closer, her new shoes silent on the thick carpet. I was going to try. I didn't know if you'd believe me. I almost didn't give you the chance. He finally turned and she saw the weight of the night in his eyes. I came to that restaurant looking for the worst in people. I was so ready to find it that I almost missed the best. Mr. Blackwell. Ethan. Please. Ethan. The name felt strange in her mouth, too intimate for what they were, employer and employee, billionaire and former waitress. What Finch was doing, it goes deeper than just the sterling cut. Ethan's expression sharpened. What do you mean? Rose pulled a thumb drive from her pocket. Pink plastic shaped like a butterfly, absurdly out of place in the corporate sterility. I've been collecting evidence for months. Screenshots, delivery schedules, recorded conversations. I knew nobody would believe me without proof. He recorded Finch. Not just him. There's a network. Other managers at other high-end places. They share suppliers, coordinate prices, cover for each other during inspections. She handed him the drive. I don't know how high it goes, but Finch wasn't working alone. Ethan stared at the small piece of plastic like it might explode. Why didn't you take this to the authorities? With what credibility? I'm nobody, and Finch made sure I knew what would happen to Marcus if I tried anything. She moved to the window, looking out at the city below. Do you know what it's like to hold information that could save people but know that using it would destroy the only person you love? Actually, I do. Something in his voice made her turn. Ethan had moved to his desk, was pulling out a locked drawer. Inside were files, photographs, documents stamped with official seals. My father built this company, he said. Started with one restaurant in Brooklyn, built it into an empire. Everyone thought he was a genius, a visionary. But I knew the truth. He cut every corner, bribed every inspector, destroyed every competitor who wouldn't play by his rules. I was 17 when I found these evidence of everything he'd done. Health violations that had made people sick. Competitors driven to suicide by his tactics. Employees blackmailed into silence. Rose moved closer, drawn by the pain in his voice. What did you do, Cho? Nothing. I sat on it for 20 years. Told myself I was protecting the employees who'd lose their jobs if the company went under. Told myself I was different, that I'd run things ethically once he was gone. But really, I was a coward. I chose comfort over conscience. That's not. It is. And when he died 5 years ago, I inherited everything, including all his sins. I've been trying to make amends ever since, but I've been doing it from up here, from safety. Last night was the first time in years I actually went down to ground level, actually looked at what my empire really was. Rose picked up one of the photographs, a younger Ethan, standing next to a man who had his eyes, but none of his kindness. Is this why you were at the Sterling Cut looking for your father's ghost? Maybe. Or maybe I was looking for someone like you. Someone who'd remind me that courage isn't about grand gestures from positions of power. It's about small acts of defiance when you have everything to lose. The intercom on his desk buzzed. Harrison's voice filled the room. Mr. Blackwell, the forensics team has finished their preliminary analysis. You need to see this. Ethan hit a button. Send them in. A team of 3 entered 2 women and a man, all carrying tablets and wearing expressions that suggested very bad news. The lead, a sharp-featured woman named Chen, didn't waste time on pleasantries. The meat Finch was sourcing contains synthetic proteins that aren't FDA approved. They're not immediately toxic, but long-term exposure could cause kidney damage, liver failure, potentially cancer. We're looking at everyone who's eaten at the Sterling Cut in the last 6 months being at risk. Rose's legs gave out. She collapsed into a chair, thinking of all the customers she'd served, all the plates she'd carried. Oh God. How many people? Conservative estimate 12,000. The number hung in the air like a death sentence. Ethan stood perfectly still, but Rose could see the storm building behind his eyes. How did it pass inspections? He asked, his voice deadly quiet. The synthetic proteins are designed to mimic real meat at a molecular level. Standard tests wouldn't catch them. You'd need specific screens that nobody runs because nobody knew to look for this. Who makes these proteins? Chen pulled up data on her tablet. A company called NutriBio Solutions. They're supposedly defunct, but shell corporations have been moving their product through a network of distributors. The same network that supplies 15 other high-end restaurants in the city. Rose stood up, her mind racing. The other managers in Finch's network, they're all using the same suppliers. Which means this isn't just about the Sterling Cut, Ethan said. This is about every luxury restaurant in Manhattan potentially poisoning their customers. Mr. Blackwell, Chen continued, there's more. We found communications between Finch and someone at NutriBio. They knew about the health risks. They've known for months. They knew, Rose's voice cracked. They knew they were poisoning people and they kept doing it. The profit margins were too good to pass up, Chen said. The synthetic meat costs 1/10 of real Wagyu. Even with bribes and kickbacks, they were making millions. Ethan moved with sudden violence, sweeping everything off his desk papers, flying a crystal award shattering against the wall. Rose had never seen someone so controlled lose it so completely. 12,000 people, he said, each word precise despite his rage. 12,000 people who trusted my restaurant, my reputation, my name, and I let them down because I wasn't paying attention. This isn't your fault, Rose said. Isn't it I hired Finch? I created a system where profit mattered more than people. I sat up here in my tower while... He stopped, forcing himself to breathe. Chen, I want every piece of evidence packaged for the FBI. Full cooperation, no lawyers playing defense. Harrison. The CFO appeared immediately, like he'd been waiting outside. Sir, I want medical screenings offered to every customer who's eaten at the Sterling Cut in the last year. Full workups our expense. Set up a medical fund, started at 50 million increase as needed, and get our PR team ready. We're going to hold a press conference this afternoon. Sir, legal strongly advises against... I don't care what legal advises. People have been poisoned in my restaurant. They deserve to know. Harrison nodded and disappeared. Chen and her team followed, leaving Ethan and Rose alone in the destroyed office. You're going to lose everything, Rose said quietly. Good. I never deserved any of it anyway. He looked at her, and she saw something broken, but also something being rebuilt. But this is going to get ugly. The media will dig into everyone involved. Your brother doesn't need that stress. We're not running. Marcus and I have faced worse than reporters. Have you faced death threats? Because that's what's coming when people realize their kids might have been poisoned. Have you faced lawsuits that will name you personally, even though you were just a server? Have you faced... Stop. Rose stood, moving close enough to see the exhaustion beneath his anger. You don't get to protect me by pushing me away. That's not how this works. How does it work then? We fix this together. You have the power and resources. I have the ground-level knowledge and the evidence. Together we can expose all of it, not just Finch, but the entire network. Ethan laughed bitterly. You make it sound simple. No, it's going to be hell, but it's the right thing to do. And isn't that why you came to the Sterling Cut last night, to find someone who still believed in doing the right thing? Before he could answer, his phone rang. Unknown number. Ethan almost ignored it, then something made him answer. Hello, Mr. Blackwell? The voice was processed electronic, impossible to identify. I hear you've been looking into our operations. Ethan hit speaker so Rose could hear. Who is this? Someone who'd like to make you an offer. Stop your investigation now, and the contamination stays limited to the Sterling Cut. Continue, and every restaurant you own gets a special delivery. You have 1 hour to decide. The line went dead. Rose and Ethan looked at each other, understanding passing between them without words. This was bigger than one corrupt manager, bigger than one restaurant. They were about to take on something that would fight back. We could stop, Rose said, testing. Take the deal, limit the damage. Could we live with ourselves? No. Then we'd better get to work. We have an hour to figure out who just threatened us and how to stop them. Rose pulled out her phone, started scrolling through the files she'd backed up there. I might have a lead. Finch mentioned a warehouse in Queens once when he was drunk. Said that's where the real money was made. Address? I can find it. But Ethan, if we do this, if we go after them directly, there's no going back. He looked around his destroyed office at the symbol of everything he'd built on compromised foundations. There never was. Rose saw movement outside Harrison, returning with what looked like half the FBI. The war was about to begin, and she was standing at ground zero in a suit that still had its tags tucked inside the collar. 6 months ago, she'd been invisible, just another server scrambling for tips. Now she was about to help bring down a criminal network that had been poisoning New York's elite. The butterfly thumb drive sat on Ethan's desk among the wreckage, incongruous and somehow perfect. Rose picked it up, handed it to him again. That napkin I was writing last night, I was going to warn you about the meat. I could taste something off in the sauce, metallic chemical. I've been tasting it for months, but nobody would listen. You knew, and you still served it. I knew something was wrong. I didn't know what. And Finch... She trailed off, then forced herself to continue. Finch made me test every dish before it went out. Said it was for quality control, but really he was making sure that if anyone got sick, I'd be sick too. Evidence of my involvement. Ethan's face went through several expressions before settling on something Rose couldn't read. You've been poisoning yourself to keep your brother's medical care. We all make trades. That was mine. Not anymore. He pulled out his phone, started typing rapidly. I'm getting you and Marcus admitted to Mount Sinai immediately. Full screening, best doctors, whatever treatment you need. Ethan, this isn't charity. This is evidence. Your medical records will prove long-term exposure, prove Finch knew what he was doing. You're not just a witness anymore, Rose. You're proof of attempted murder. The FBI agents were at the door now, Harrison ushering them in with professional calm. The lead agent, a woman with steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen too much, looked between Ethan and Rose. Mr. Blackwell, I'm Agent Sarah Cole. We understand you have information about contaminated food products being distributed through high-end restaurants. Ethan handed her the butterfly drive. We have more than information. We have proof of a conspiracy that's been poisoning New York's wealthy for months, possibly years. And you are... Agent Cole turned to Rose. Rose Vance. I was a server at the Sterling Cut. And I've been documenting everything. Agent Cole's expression shifted, sharpened. You're the whistleblower. She's the hero, Ethan said firmly. Without her, this would have continued indefinitely. We'll need to take you both into protective custody. If this network is as extensive as you suggest. No. Rose's voice was stronger than she felt. We're not hiding. They threatened every restaurant Ethan owns, which means they're scared. They're going to make mistakes. And when they do, we need to be ready to act. Ms. Vance, with all due respect, you're a civilian. This is FBI jurisdiction now. With all due respect, Agent Cole, I've been inside this for 6 months. I know how they think, how they operate. You need me active, not hidden. Ethan moved to stand beside her, a unified front. She's right. And I have resources you don't, private security, corporate intelligence connections throughout the industry. We do this together or the network disappears into smoke before you can build a case. Agent Cole studied them for a long moment. You realize what you're risking. These people have already shown they're willing to pose on thousands for profit. What do you think they'll do to the two of you? Whatever they're planning, Rose said, thinking of Marcus in his hospital bed, of all the customers she'd watched unknowingly consume poison. It can't be worse than what they've already done. The agent's phone buzzed. She answered, listened, her face growing darker with each passing second. When she hung up, she looked at them with something approaching fear. There's been an incident at Mount Sinai. 3 patients admitted with acute organ failure. All of them ate at the Sterling Cut last night. Rose felt the floor tilt beneath her. Those were her customers. People she'd served, smiled at, wished a pleasant evening. It's accelerating, Ethan said. Whatever's in the latest batch, it's worse than before. Or they're making it worse on purpose, Rose said, the realization hitting her like cold water. The phone call, they're not just threatening future contamination. They're activating something already in play. Agent Cole was already moving barking orders into her phone. I need hazmat teams at every restaurant on this list. Nobody eats anything until we've tested everything. But Rose wasn't listening anymore. She was thinking about the pattern about Finch's behavior in recent weeks. More nervous, more desperate, more cruel. Like he knew something was coming. Like he was trying to position himself for an ending he saw approaching. Ethan, she said quietly, what if this isn't about money anymore? What do you mean? What if it never was? What if the money was just a bonus? What if someone wanted to poison specific people and needed a distribution network that would reach them? The room went silent. Agent Cole lowered her phone. Ethan stood perfectly still. They all understood the implication. This wasn't just corruption or greed. This was something worse. Targeted assassination disguised as food contamination, Agent Cole said slowly. But who would be worth this level of risk? Rose was already pulling up reservations on her phone, the staff app Finch didn't know she still had access to. I can tell you everyone who ate at the Sterling Cut in the last 6 months. Every name, every date, every table. Do it. Her fingers flew across the screen, data flowing. Politicians, CEOs, foreign diplomats, tech billionaires, pharmaceutical executives, federal judges. The guest list read like a who's who of American power. There, Ethan pointed at a name. Judge Martinez. He's presiding over the NutriBio bankruptcy proceedings. And here, Rose added, Senator Williams. She's on the FDA Oversight Committee. They're eliminating obstacles, Agent Cole breathed. This isn't just poisoning for profit. It's an attack on the regulatory system itself. The phone on Ethan's desk rang, the same unknown number. Put it on speaker, Agent Cole ordered, signaling her team to start tracing. Ethan answered. You're running out of time, Mr. Blackwell. The electronic voice was calm, almost amused. Have you made your decision? I have a counteroffer, Ethan said. Full immunity for Rose Vance and her brother. They walk away clean, and I stop investigating. You're hardly in a position to negotiate. Neither are you. The FBI is already tracing this call. Your network is blown. The only question is whether you want to deal with me or with them. There was a pause. You're bluffing. Agent Sarah Cole, FBI Financial Crimes Division, Agent Cole said clearly. You're speaking on a recorded line. I suggest you consider Mr. Blackwell's offer. The line went dead immediately. Did we get them? Ethan asked. Cole shook her head. Bounced through too many proxies. But we rattled them. They'll make a mistake now. Rose's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, a photo of Marcus in his hospital bed, taken from inside his room. The message below was simple: stop now, or he dies badly. She showed it to Ethan and Agent Cole, her hand shaking. They're in the hospital. They're in his room. Ethan was already moving. Harrison, I need our security team at Mount Sinai immediately. Full protective detail on Marcus Vance. Already en route, sir, Harrison called back. I anticipated this possibility. Agent Cole was coordinating with hospital security, but Rose wasn't listening. She was staring at the photo, at her brother's sleeping face, at how vulnerable he looked. Everything she'd done had been to protect him, and now she'd put him directly in danger. We can stop, Ethan said quietly, reading her thoughts. No one would blame you. Marcus would. If he knew I let people keep getting poisoned to protect him, he'd never forgive me. She looked up at Ethan. We need to go on offense. Now. That warehouse in Queens, we need to hit it before they can clear out. That's FBI jurisdiction, Agent Cole started. By the time you get warrants, it'll be empty, Rose interrupted. But a private citizen checking on their own business interests, Ethan caught on immediately. I own a shipping company with facilities in Queens. If I happened to be doing a surprise inspection and discovered criminal activity on adjacent properties, you'd be obligated to report it immediately, Agent Cole finished. A ghost of a smile crossed her face. I can't officially condone this. You're not. You're investigating the restaurants. What Mr. Blackwell does with his own time is his business. Rose stood, adrenaline replacing fear. Then we should go. Every minute we wait, more people get sick. But Ethan was looking at her with an expression she couldn't read. You don't have to come. This could go very wrong. Everything in my life has already gone wrong. At least this time it's for the right reasons. She moved toward the door, then stopped. Besides, you need me. I know what to look for, what doesn't belong. I've been seeing the patterns for months. 20 minutes later, they were in Ethan's private car, speeding through Queens, while Harrison coordinated with security teams via encrypted phone. Rose had changed into jeans and a jacket from a bag Harrison had somehow produced, and Ethan had shed his suit jacket for a bulletproof vest that security had insisted on. This is insane, Rose said, watching warehouse after warehouse flash by. This is necessary, Ethan corrected. Those 3 patients at Mount Sinai. One of them is a 12-year-old girl. Birthday dinner with her parents. Rose closed her eyes, seeing every child she'd served, every family celebration she'd witnessed. How did we not know? How did we serve poison to children and not know? Because we trusted the system. Because we assumed someone else was checking, someone else was responsible. He turned to look at her. That ends today. The car pulled up to a seemingly abandoned warehouse, its windows dark, no signs of life. But Rose recognized it immediately from photos she'd seen on Finch's phone. The loading dock, the rust pattern on the door, the security camera with the broken lens that wasn't broken at all. "That's it," she said. Ethan's security team was already in position, 6 men and women in tactical gear, all former military, all legally licensed to protect Blackwell properties. The head of security, a compact woman named Torres, approached the car. "Infrared shows 12 people inside heavy machinery running. Whatever they're doing it now." "Can we get closer?" Ethan asked. "Not recommended. But there's an office building next door abandoned. We can set up surveillance from there." They moved quickly, Rose surprised by her own calm. Maybe she'd used up all her fear, or maybe finding out she'd been slowly poisoned for months had shifted her perspective on danger. Either way, she followed Ethan and Torres into the empty building upstairs that creaked with every step to a window that overlooked the warehouse's loading dock. What she saw there stopped her cold. Trucks were being loaded with refrigerated containers, each marked with the logos of high-end restaurants she recognized. Not just Ethan's place's competitors, independent establishments, even corporate dining services for major companies. "They're expanding," she whispered. "This isn't retreat. They're accelerating distribution." Ethan was already on the phone with Agent Cole. "We need hazmat teams now. They're shipping contaminated product as we speak." But Rose was looking at something else, a man supervising the loading, his face familiar even from this distance. She pulled out her phone, zoomed in with the camera, captured his image. "I know him," she said. "He came to the Sterling Cut last month. Said he was a food critic from the Times, but something felt off. Finch treated him like royalty, completely different from how he normally handled critics." Torres was scanning the scene with binoculars. "Sir, we've got a problem. They're loading accelerant into those trucks. If they're planning what I think they're planning, they're going to destroy the evidence," Ethan finished. "Burn the whole network to prevent investigation." "Including the restaurants," Rose added, horror dawning. "They're going to burn down restaurants full of people to hide what they've done." The accelerant gleamed in the warehouse lights like liquid death, each canister being loaded with military precision. Rose counted 17 trucks, 17 potential infernos waiting to happen. Her hand moved instinctively to her pocket, finding the pen she always carried, the napkins she'd grabbed from Ethan's car, old habits from years of taking orders on whatever was handy. "We need to stop them now," Torres said, her hand moving to her weapon. "Once those trucks leave—" "Wait." Rose was writing on the napkin, her handwriting quick but clear. "Look at the pattern. They're not loading randomly. Each truck is getting specific containers, specific restaurants." She drew lines connecting observations, truck numbers, container markings, destinations she recognized from delivery schedules. "They're not going to burn everything at once. This is coordinated, timed." Ethan studied her improvised map. "You're right. The timing's too perfect. They're creating alibis, making it look like accidents across the city rather than coordinated arson." "Which means we have a window," Rose continued, still writing. "If we can intercept even one truck, prove the connection." A gunshot cracked through the air. The window beside Rose's head exploded in a shower of glass. Torres reacted instantly, pulling both Rose and Ethan to the floor as more shots followed, methodical and precise. "They made us," Torres said unnecessarily, already on her radio. "All teams were compromised. Executive protection protocol now." Rose could hear shouting from the warehouse engines, starting the organized chaos of a hurried evacuation. They were going to get away. All that evidence, all those connections disappearing into the night while they huddled on a dirty floor. "No," she said, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. "We're not letting them run." She started to stand, but Ethan pulled her back down. "Are you insane? They're shooting at us." "They're shooting at windows. If they wanted us dead, we'd be dead." She met his eyes, saw his fear for her, and something else, trust. I've watched Finch for 6 months. This is his playbook. Create chaos, escape, and confusion. But he always has a backup plan, always leaves someone behind to clean up. So we don't chase the trucks. We wait for the cleaner. Torres looked at her with new respect. That's actually smart. They'll send someone back to destroy evidence, eliminate witnesses. And we'll be ready, Rose finished. She held up the napkin she'd been writing on, now covered with observations, connections, patterns. This is what they're afraid of. Not the FBI, not the investigation. The details. The little things only someone on the ground would notice. Ethan took the napkin, studied it with growing amazement. You mapped their entire network on a napkin. I've been mapping it for months. This just connected the final pieces. She pointed to a symbol she'd drawn, a stylized lotus flower she'd seen on several containers. That's not a company logo. It's a chemical signature. Each batch is marked so they know which formula went where, who got what dose. They're running experiments, Ethan breathed. Different formulas for different targets. The 12-year-old girl, Rose said, her voice breaking slightly. She wasn't random. Her father's on the city planning commission. They were probably trying to influence a zoning decision. The shooting had stopped. Through the broken window, they could see the last truck pulling away, leaving the warehouse seemingly empty. But Rose knew better. She'd learned to read the negative spaces, the things that weren't there but should be. There, she whispered, pointing to a shadow that didn't move with the wind. Second floor, third window. Someone's watching. Torres focused her scope. Confirmed. Single subject appears to be. Christ, it's Finch. Rose felt her blood turn to ice. Of course it was Finch. He was the one who knew all the details, all the connections. He was the cleanup. He's got something, Torres continued. Looks like a laptop and some kind of chemical container. He's going to destroy the digital records and contaminate the scene, Ethan said. Make it too dangerous for investigators to process. Unless we stop him, Rose said, already moving toward the stairs. Absolutely not, Ethan and Torres said in unison. I know him, Rose insisted. I know how he thinks, what he's afraid of. Let me talk to him. He tried to kill you, Ethan reminded her. No, he tried to control me. There's a difference. She pulled out her phone, scrolled to a recording she'd made weeks ago, Finch drunk at a staff party, confessing his fears about his ex-wife, his debts, his sick mother he couldn't afford to visit. He's not a mastermind. He's a middle manager who got in too deep. And right now he's more afraid of them than he is of us. Before anyone could stop her, she hit play on the recording and held it up to Torres's radio, broadcasting Finch's slurred voice across the emergency channel she knew he'd be monitoring. The effect was immediate. Finch appeared at the warehouse door, laptop clutched to his chest, face twisted with rage and fear. Rose, his voice carried across the empty lot. You recorded me. I recorded everything, Gregory. She stood, making herself visible despite Torres's urgent gestures to stay down. Every conversation, every threat, every moment you thought you were in control. You stupid little... He stopped, visibly collecting himself. It doesn't matter. You're nobody. Your evidence means nothing. Maybe. But Ethan Blackwell's evidence, FBI evidence, that means something. She took a step toward the door. You're the fall guy, Gregory. You know that, right? When this goes south, and it's already going south, you're the one they'll blame. The rogue manager who went too far. Shut up. Your mother's in a nursing home in Jersey. Medicaid facility. You haven't visited in 2 years because you're ashamed of not being able to afford better. Another step closer. What happens to her when you're in federal prison? Finch's hand went to his pocket, and Rose saw the gun before Torres's warning shout. but she didn't run. Instead, she pulled out another napkin, held it up so he could see. "I wrote something for you," she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "A deal. You give us the laptop, testify about the network, and Ethan ensures your mother gets proper care. Best facility, all expenses paid for as long as she needs it." "You can't make that deal." "I can," Ethan said, stepping out beside Rose. "And unlike your current employers, I keep my promises." Finch laughed bitterly. "You think I have a choice? You think they'll let me testify I'm dead the moment I open my mouth?" "You're dead anyway," Rose said quietly. "They sent you here alone, didn't they? To clean up and then what accidentally get caught in the contamination. Tragic loss of a dedicated manager who tried to stop the conspiracy." She could see she'd hit the mark. Finch's face went pale, the gun shaking in his hand. "They gave you something to spread in the warehouse," she continued. "Something that would make investigators sick, maybe kill them. But they didn't give you protection, did they? No hazmat suit, no respirator. Just you and a chemical weapon you're supposed to deploy bare-handed." The gun lowered slightly. "How did you—" "Because I pay attention. Because while you were terrorizing me, I was learning everything about you. Your coffee order, triple shot, 2 sugars always in a paper cup, because you're allergic to the coating on the ceramic ones. Your Tuesday routine, gym at 5 a.m., always skipping leg day. Your password, your mother's birthday backwards." She took another step. "I know you, Gregory, and I know you're not a killer. You're just a man who made bad choices and can't see a way out." "There is no way out. There's always a way out." She held up the napkin again. "This is yours." For a moment the world balanced on a knife's edge. Finch with his gun, Rose with her napkin, Ethan and Torres ready to act, the warehouse looming behind them all like a monument to greed and suffering. Then sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer, and Finch made his choice. The gun clattered to the ground. The laptop followed. He sank to his knees in the gravel, looking older than his 43 years, defeated in a way that went beyond mere capture. "They'll kill me," he said. "They'll try," Ethan agreed, moving forward to secure the laptop. "But they'll have to go through my security to do it." FBI vehicles flooded the lot, Agent Cole emerging from the lead car with the expression of frustrated admiration. "I specifically said not to engage." "We didn't engage," Rose said, exhaustion suddenly hitting her like a wave. "We negotiated." Cole looked at Finch being cuffed at the laptop in Ethan's hands, at the napkin Rose still held. "Is that your incident report on a napkin? It's how I think best. Napkins and possibilities. And what possibilities are you thinking about now?" Rose looked at the warehouse, at the fleeing trucks they could still catch if they moved fast, at Finch, who held the keys to understanding it all. "I'm thinking we have maybe 6 hours before those trucks reach their destinations. 6 hours to decode that laptop, track the shipments, and stop 17 restaurants from becoming crime scenes." 16, Finch said quietly from where he knelt. The Sterling cut was supposed to be tonight's finale. Biggest, most visible, most victims. My job was to make sure Rose was there. To eliminate the witness who knew the most. Everyone turned to stare at him. "You were supposed to kill me," Rose asked, her voice smaller than she intended. "I was supposed to make sure you were working tonight. They'd handle the rest. Make it look like you were patient zero, the server who spread the contamination." His laugh was bitter. Poetic justice, they called it. The nobody who tried to be somebody, bringing down the whole house of cards. Ethan moved before Torres could stop him, hauling Finch to his feet by his collar. "You were going to murder her. I was going to let her be murdered. There's a difference." "No," Rose said quietly. "There isn't." She turned away from them all, walked to the edge of the lot, where the city sprawled before her lights, twinkling like stars that had fallen to earth. Somewhere out there, 16 trucks were racing toward their destinations. Somewhere, her brother lay in a hospital bed, vulnerable and unaware. Somewhere, a 12-year-old girl was fighting for her life because her father had the wrong job. Rose, Ethan's voice close behind her. We need that napkin. Your map of the network. She handed it to him without turning around. It's all there. Everything I noticed, everything that didn't fit. 6 months of observations compressed onto a cocktail napkin. This is incredible. You mapped their entire operation while serving steaks to investment bankers. I had to do something to stay sane. She finally turned to face him. Do you know what it's like to smile while serving poison, to pretend everything's fine while knowing people are being hurt? Actually, yes. He gestured to the skyline. I've been doing it for years, building restaurants that cater to the worst impulses of the wealthy while telling myself I was creating something beautiful. It's not the same. Isn't it? We both compromised. We both looked the other way. The only difference is you did it for love and I did it for pride. Agent Cole approached, laptop in hand. We've got into the system. Finch's password worked his mother's birthday backwards, just like you said. Rose, we need you to look at this. They gathered around the screen, Rose recognizing the interface immediately. The same system the sterling cut used, but modified darker wrong. There, she pointed at a series of entries. Those are the real shipments. See how they're coded. Each one corresponds to a formula, a target, a timeline. Can you decode it? I can try. She pulled out another napkin, started writing. The patterns are mathematical. Finch isn't creative enough for true randomness. He uses variations on the same themes. Look, every third entry shifts by a factor of 7. It's how he used to adjust time cards to skim hours. Her pen flew across the napkin, equations and observations flowing together. The others watched in amazement as she reverse-engineered months of criminal planning on a piece of paper meant for wiping mouths. Got it, she said finally. The trucks are scheduled to arrive at staggered intervals starting at midnight. Each location has a specific ignition point, kitchen, grease trap, electrical panel, gas line. They're not just burning evidence, they're creating a pattern that looks like a citywide infrastructure failure. Mass casualties disguised as infrastructure collapse, Cole breathed. This is terrorism. This is business, Finch corrected from where he sat. Do you have any idea how much money is in play? Construction contracts for rebuilding, insurance payouts, real estate deals for the cleared land. Everyone profits except the people who die. Rose felt sick. All those times Finch had complained about money, she'd thought he was just greedy. But this was something else, a systematic harvesting of human suffering for profit. Who's behind it? She asked. Who's really running this? Finch looked at her for a long moment. You served him coffee last week, complimented your attention to detail, left a $100 tip. Rose's mind raced through recent customers, landing on one that made her blood freeze. Vincent Chen, the pharmaceutical executive. Among others, it's a consortium. Chen handles the chemical side. Judge Martinez, yes, the one being poisoned, his brother runs the construction company that gets the rebuilding contracts. Senator Williams's husband owns the insurance company that's been refusing claims, forcing restaurants to cut costs, making them vulnerable to Finch's offers. Finch smiled grimly. Everyone's dirty, Rose, even the victims. Especially the victims, Ethan said quietly. They're eliminating the ones who won't play ball, replacing them with ones who will. Torres's radio crackled. Sir, we have movement at the Sterling Cut. 3 vehicles, no lights approaching the service entrance. They're early, so, Rose said. They know we're onto them, so they're accelerating the timeline. How long until the other sites? Cole asked. Rose checked her calculations. If they're moving everything up proportionally, 40 minutes for the first wave, maybe 90 for all of them. We can't cover 17 locations in 40 minutes, Torres said. We don't have to, Rose said, an idea forming. We just have to make them think we can. She grabbed Ethan's phone, pulled up the Sterling Cuts social media accounts she still had the passwords from when Finch made her post promotional content after hours. What are you doing? Ethan asked. Saving lives with a napkin and an Instagram account. She typed rapidly. Urgent gas leak detected at the Sterling Cut. Evacuation in progress. All sister restaurants implementing emergency protocols. Stay tuned for updates. The post went live to 40,000 followers. Within seconds, shares and comments started flooding in. Now the others. She posted similar messages to every restaurant account she could access, creating a cascade of warnings that spread faster than any truck could drive. Cole's phone rang immediately. Yes, sir. No, sir, we didn't authorize. Yes, I understand. She hung up, looking at Rose with something like awe. You just caused a citywide restaurant panic. The mayor's office is freaking out. Good. Panic means evacuation. Evacuation means lives saved. Through the warehouse window, they could see the city reacting, lights coming on in buildings, people streaming out of restaurants, sirens converging from all directions. Rose's improvised warning had become a tsunami of caution, overwhelming the conspirators' careful timeline. Ethan's phone buzzed with a text. You just cost us billions, little waitress. Rose took the phone, typed back. You just learned what a nobody can do with a napkin and the truth. The response was immediate. This isn't over. No, Rose said aloud, looking at the team around her. Ethan, who'd risked everything, Torres, who'd protected them whole, who'd believed them, Finch, who'd finally chosen a side. It's just beginning. She pulled out one last napkin, wrote carefully, then handed it to Agent Cole. That's the chemical formula Finch described. Any biochemist can synthesize an antidote from it. Make sure it gets to the hospital. That 12-year-old girl deserves a chance. Cole took the napkin like it was precious, which it was. How do you know chemistry? I don't. But I served a chemistry professor every Thursday for 3 months. He liked to explain things while he ate. I listened. She smiled tiredly. Waitresses are invisible, remember? People say things around us they'd never say to someone they thought was paying attention. The warehouse was swarming with federal agents, now evidence being cataloged, the crime scene preserved. But Rose wasn't watching that. She was looking at her phone at a text from Marcus. Saw the news. Are you okay? Are you safe? Are you being the hero I always knew you were? She typed back. I'm trying. Love you. Ms. Vance, Agent Cole said formally. We're going to need you to come in for a full debriefing. This napkin evidence is remarkable, but we need everything, every observation, every conversation, everything you remember. Tomorrow, Ethan said firmly. Tonight, she goes to the hospital. She sees her brother. She gets medical attention for 6 months of slow poisoning. She rests. Mr. Blackwell, Agent Cole, this woman just saved thousands of lives with napkins and Instagram. I think we can give her 1 night with her family. Cole nodded slowly. Tomorrow then. But Rose, don't throw away any napkins. We're going to need them all. As they walked back to Ethan's car, Rose found herself laughing, exhausted, slightly hysterical, but genuine laughter. What? Ethan asked. I spent 6 months thinking I was nobody. Invisible. Worthless except for my ability to carry plates and smile. She held up her pen, the one she'd used to map a conspiracy on table napkins. Turns out being nobody was exactly what made me somebody. They never saw me coming because they never saw me at all. I saw you, Ethan said quietly. No, you saw a waitress who interested you. It wasn't until I handed you that napkin that you really saw me. He stopped walking, turned to face her fully. You're right. And wrong. I saw someone surviving impossibly difficult circumstances with grace. I saw courage I didn't know existed. I saw someone who could have been corrupted by the system, but chose to document its failures instead. He pulled out the first napkin she'd written, the one from the restaurant, now carefully preserved in an evidence bag. Thank you for being exactly who you are. You wrote that for me, but Rose, thank you for being exactly who you are. And she wanted to say something profound, something worthy of the moment. Instead, she said, I need to see my brother. I know. Let's go. As the car pulled away from the warehouse, from the scene of what would become the biggest restaurant scandal in New York history, Rose realized she still had napkins in her pocket. Clean ones waiting for whatever came next. She pulled one out, started writing again, not evidence this time, but thoughts, feelings, the story of how a waitress saved a city with careful observation and the courage to speak truth to power. The napkin filled quickly, her handwriting, getting smaller as she ran out of space. But that was okay. She had more napkins. She had all the napkins she'd ever need. And for the first time in 6 months, she had hope. The city flowed past the windows, lights blurring into streams of gold and silver. Somewhere 17 restaurants stood empty, their would-be victims safe at home. Somewhere a 12-year-old girl was receiving an antidote derived from a cocktail napkin formula. Somewhere powerful people were realizing that their invisible victims had been watching all along, taking notes on whatever was handy, preparing to tell their stories. Rose Vance, former waitress, current hero, future unknown, folded her napkin carefully and put it in her pocket. Tomorrow there would be testimonies and trials, justice, and probably danger. But tonight she was going to hold her brother's hand and tell him how she'd changed the world with nothing but attention to detail and the courage to write it down. The napkin that changed everything wasn't the one she'd given Ethan in the restaurant. It wasn't the one with the conspiracy map or the chemical formula or the network diagram. It was all of them, every small observation, every documented cruelty, every moment when she'd chosen to remember instead of forget. The hospital corridor stretched before them like a tunnel of fluorescent judgment, each step echoing against linoleum that had seen too much suffering. Rose's hand trembled as she reached for Marcus's door, but not from fear, from rage. The medical report in her other hand confirmed what she'd suspected. 6 months of systematic poisoning had damaged her liver, her kidneys showing early signs of failure. The same organs failing in her brother, but for different reasons. The irony wasn't lost on her. 20 minutes, Torres said quietly from her position by the door. Then we need to move you both to the secure wing. Rose nodded, pushing into the room where Marcus lay, connected to machines that sang his mortality in electronic beeps. His eyes opened immediately. He'd always been able to sense her presence, even as children hiding from their father's drunken rages. Rosie. His voice was whisper-thin but warm. You look like you've been fighting dragons. Something like that, and she took his hand, careful of the IV line. How are you feeling? Like I'm dying, but with excellent medical care. His attempt at a smile broke her heart. I saw the news. Every channel is talking about the restaurant poisonings. They're saying a whistleblower saved thousands of lives. Marcus. It was you, wasn't it, my invisible sister who everyone underestimates. His fingers squeezed hers weakly. You saved them all. Before she could answer, the door opened again. Ethan entered carrying 2 cups of coffee and a tablet displaying breaking news. Vincent Chen's face filled the screen, the pharmaceutical executive being arrested at his Westchester mansion, FBI agents leading him past perfectly manicured hedges, while news helicopters circled overhead like mechanical vultures. "They got Chen," Ethan said. "He's claiming he's a victim too, that someone was poisoning him." "He's not wrong," Rose said, remembering the pattern she'd seen in the data. They were all poisoning each other. Chen was eliminating competition, while his competitors were doing the same to him. Mutually assured destruction, except they didn't know they were all using the same weapon. Marcus looked between them, understanding dawning. "The man who ordered the steak. You're Ethan Blackwell." "I am." "You're the one who's been protecting Rose." "Actually, she's been protecting me, and everyone else." Ethan set down the coffee, pulled up a chair. "Your sister discovered a conspiracy that would have killed hundreds, possibly thousands. She did it while being threatened, poisoned, and terrorized. She's the bravest person I've ever met." Marcus smiled, then real and knowing. "She gets that from our mother. Before the cancer took her, she stood up to our father every single day. Never backed down, even when it cost her everything." Rose hadn't expected the tears, but there they were, hot and sudden. "Don't compare me to Mom. She was exactly like you. Stubborn, observant, always writing things down on whatever was handy." Marcus pointed weakly to a box under his bed. "I kept them all. Every napkin, every receipt, every scrap of paper she wrote on. Just like I kept yours." Rose pulled out the box with shaking hands. Inside were hundreds of napkins, some yellowed with age, covered in their mother's handwriting. Grocery lists, phone numbers, but also observations, fears, dreams for her children. And mixed among them, Rose's own napkins from the past months, the ones she'd thrown away at the restaurant, only to have Marcus retrieve them during his visits. "You knew," she asked. "I knew you were documenting something." The writing got more frantic, more detailed. "I thought maybe you were planning to write a book or expose bad working conditions. I never imagined." He gestured weakly at the news still playing. "This." Agent Cole appeared in the doorway, her expression grim. "We have a problem. Chen's lawyers are already spinning a narrative that Rose was the mastermind, that she used her position to poison customers for money. They're saying she fabricated evidence to frame innocent businessmen." "That's insane," Ethan said. "It's strategy. They have Rose's medical records showing she was exposed to the same toxins. They're claiming she did it to herself to appear as a victim." Cole held up her phone, showing a news segment where a polished attorney was already selling this version to eager cameras. "They're saying she targeted wealthy customers out of class resentment." Rose felt the room spin slightly. She'd saved lives, risked everything, and now they were trying to make her the villain. It was almost funny in a cosmic joke sort of way. "They're scared," she said quietly. "This is what cornered animals do, they attack." "We need to get ahead of this," Cole said. "The media is going to want a statement, a face to put with the heroism. Otherwise, Chen's version becomes the truth." "No interviews," Ethan said immediately. "Rose has been through enough." "Actually," Rose said, standing despite the lightheadedness, "I want to do it. But not an interview. I want to show them something." An hour later, they stood in the Sterling Cuts empty dining room, cameras from every major network pointed at the table 17 where it all began. Rose had insisted on this location, this table, this particular angle where the kitchen door was visible behind her. "My name is Rose Vance," she began, her voice stronger than she felt. "6 months ago, I started working here as a waitress. I was nobody special, just another person trying to pay bills and take care of family. but being nobody special meant I could see things others couldn't. She pulled out a napkin and began writing as she spoke. Waitresses are invisible. We're furniture that brings food. People discuss crimes, affairs, business deals right in front of us because we don't matter enough to notice. But I noticed. I wrote it all down. The camera zoomed in on her hands as she drew the network diagram from memory names, connections, the web of corruption that had nearly consumed the city. Gregory Finch forced me to taste every dish before serving it. He said it was quality control, but really he was making sure I'd be poisoned too. Evidence of my involvement, he called it. What he didn't know was that I was documenting everything. She pulled out the box Marcus had kept showing the hundreds of napkins. 6 months of evidence written on whatever was handy. She stood, walked to the kitchen door. Through this window, I watched crimes being committed. I saw deliveries that shouldn't exist, money changing hands, good people being threatened into silence. And yes, I served contaminated food to innocent people, because the alternative was watching my brother die without medical care. The admission hung in the air. She could feel the cameras drinking in her confession, the attorneys probably salivating at the legal implications. But last night, she continued, returning to the table, I met someone who reminded me that courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about doing what's right despite the fear. She looked directly at Ethan, who stood just off camera. Ethan Blackwell came to his own restaurant disguised as a nobody, testing whether his employees would treat everyone with dignity. He found corruption, cruelty, and conspiracy, but he also found people trying to do right in impossible circumstances. Her phone buzzed a message from an unknown number. She recognized the style immediately, Chen's people trying to intimidate her even now. She held it up to the cameras. They're threatening me right now as I speak to you. They want me silent, scared, small. She picked up her pen again. But I learned something from my mother, who wrote her thoughts on napkins because she couldn't afford journals. I learned that the smallest voices, when they speak truth, can topple empires. She wrote on a fresh napkin, held it up. The truth isn't about class or revenge. It's about 17 restaurants nearly becoming crematoriums. It's about a 12-year-old girl who almost died for her father's job. It's about greed so profound, it would burn half of Manhattan for insurance money. Vincent Chen's attorney appeared on another screen, trying to respond in real time, but Rose wasn't done. She pulled out the laptop they'd recovered from Finch, now in an evidence bag, but its screen still visible. This contains every transaction, every payment, every person involved. Mr. Chen wants you to believe I orchestrated this fine. Let's look at his personal communications. She read from her napkin notes, dates and times memorized. March 15th, Chen writes, increase the dose for table 17's regular. The waitress is getting suspicious. April 2nd. If the Vance girl becomes a problem, we have leverage with the brother. May 18th. Make sure she's working the night we torch the place. The attorney's face on the screen had gone pale. These were direct quotes from encrypted messages they thought were destroyed. How? Someone off camera whispered. Because I pay attention, Rose said simply. Because when you're nobody, you learn to remember everything. You can't afford lawyers or recordings, so you become the record. Agent Cole stepped into frame, lending federal authority to Rose's words. The FBI has confirmed every detail of Ms. Vance's account. We've arrested 47 individuals so far, with more warrants being executed as we speak. This conspiracy reached into pharmaceutical companies, construction firms, insurance corporations, and regulatory bodies. Without Rose Vance's courage and documentation, thousands would have died. But I want to be clear about something, Rose added, looking directly at the camera. I'm not a hero. I'm a waitress who got tired of serving poison. The real heroes are the people who ran into those restaurants last night, to evacuate strangers. The doctors treating victims right now. The agents risking their lives to arrest dangerous people. She picked up one last napkin, wrote something, then placed it on the table. This is my resignation from the Sterling Cut. Not because I'm ashamed of working here, but because this place needs to become something else. Something better. Ethan stepped forward, then into frame, standing beside her. The Sterling Cut and all Blackwell restaurants will be closing for renovation. Not physical renovation, moral renovation. When we reopen, every employee will be a partial owner. Every worker will have a voice in operations. And Table 17, where Rose Vance saved New York, will bear a plaque with her words, "Courage is seeing the truth and speaking it no matter the cost." The cameras captured them standing together, the billionaire in his torn jacket and the waitress in her borrowed suit, equals in the fight against corruption. But Rose wasn't looking at the cameras anymore. She was watching through the window as FBI agents led another conspirator past Judge Martinez's brother, the construction mogul who'd planned to rebuild on the ashes of tragedy. Her phone rang. Marcus's doctor. "Ms. Vance, your brother's blood work just came back. The kidney function. It's improving. The treatment plan you suggested based on the toxin analysis, it's working." Rose sank into the chair at Table 17, overwhelmed. Ethan's hand found her shoulder, steady and warm. "We're not done," he said quietly. "This is just the beginning. Chen has resources connections. They'll come after you legally, personally, every way they can." "I know." She looked at the napkin with her resignation. "That's why I can't stay here. I need to be something more than a symbol." "What do you want to be?" She thought about her mother's napkins, about Marcus lying in his hospital bed, about the 12-year-old girl who'd survived because someone paid attention. "I want to be the person who makes sure this never happens again. Not just here, but everywhere. Every restaurant, every workplace where the powerful prey on the powerless." Cole cleared her throat. "The FBI could use someone with your observational skills. We're forming a task force specifically for hospitality industry crimes. And I'm restructuring my entire company," Ethan added. "I need someone who understands both sides, management and workers. Someone who sees what others miss." Rose looked between them, then at the cameras still rolling. "Can I do both?" For the first time since the nightmare began, Ethan genuinely smiled. "You just saved New York with napkins and Instagram. I think you can do anything." The press conference ended, but the cameras kept rolling as Rose returned to the kitchen one last time. She found the staff there, not just from the Sterling Cut, but from all 17 targeted restaurants. They'd come together in the crisis, supporting each other, sharing information that helped the FBI track down conspirators. Amanda, the young server who'd taken over Rose's tables that first night, approached nervously. "Ms. Vance, we wanted to thank you. You could have just saved yourself, but you saved all of us." "We saved each other," Rose corrected. "And it's just Rose. I'm still just Rose." But she wasn't, and everyone knew it. She was the waitress who'd brought down a conspiracy, the nobody who'd become everybody's hero, the woman who'd proved that power wasn't about position, it was about truth and the courage to speak it. Torres approached with a secure phone. "Ms. Vance, it's Finch. He's in protective custody, but he wants to talk to you." Rose took the phone, walked to a quiet corner. "Gregory?" "I gave them everything," he said without preamble. "Names, dates, accounts. Everything you didn't already figure out with your napkins." "Why?" "Because you were right. About my mother, about being the fall guy, about all of it. But mostly because you saw me. The real me, not just the monster I'd become. Nobody's done that in years. What happens to you now? Witness protection, probably. A new life somewhere far from here. Rose, I'm sorry. For all of it. The threats, the poisoning, using your brother against you. I became everything I used to hate. We all did things we're not proud of to survive. You didn't. You stayed good. That napkin you wrote offering me a deal. You could have let me burn, but you offered redemption instead. That's not nothing. The line went dead. Rose stood holding the phone, thinking about redemption and napkins and the thin line between villain and victim. Ethan found her there. The FBI wants to move you and Marcus to a safe house tonight. Chen's people are mobilizing. Of course they are. She turned to face him. You know this is going to destroy your business empire. The lawsuits, the reputation damage, the cost of restructuring everything. Good. It needed destroying. What we build next will be better. He pulled out a napkin, one of hers carefully preserved. You wrote something once, excellence without empathy is just another form of cruelty. That's going to be the founding principle of whatever comes next. Through the window, Rose could see the city continuing its relentless pace. But something had changed. The invisible people, the servers, the cleaners, the ones who saw everything while being seen by no one, they were looking up. They were writing things down. They were finding their voices. Mr. Blackwell. Harrison appeared, tablet in hand. The board is calling an emergency meeting. They want to discuss damage control. Tell them I'll be there in an hour, with my new senior vice president of ethical operations. Rose blinked. You can't just... I can, actually. Majority shareholder, remember. He turned to Harrison. Draw up the paperwork. Full executive package including medical coverage for her brother, relocation expenses, and a security detail. Sir, the board will accept it, or I'll dissolve the company and rebuild from scratch. His tone brooked no argument. Rose Vance saved this company from becoming complicit in mass murder. The least we can do is give her the power to make sure it never happens again. As Harrison hurried off, Rose found herself laughing. Not hysteria this time, but genuine amusement at the absurdity of it all. From waitress to executive in 24 hours, she said. That has to be some kind of record. You were never just a waitress, Ethan said seriously. You were a guardian. You stood between evil and its victims even when it cost you everything. That's not a job title, that's character. Agent Cole returned her expression urgent. We have a situation. 3 more restaurants just reported contamination, not part of the original 17. This thing is spreading. Rose's mind immediately went into pattern recognition mode. They're improvising. With the main plan blown, they're activating backup protocols. Where are the new targets? Brooklyn, Queens, and the Bronx. Working-class neighborhoods, family restaurants. They're shifting from high-value targets to high-volume, Rose said, already pulling out a napkin to map the new pattern. If they can't kill the elite, they'll kill the masses and blame it on contagion spreading from the original sites. How do we stop it? Rose looked at the map she was drawing, seeing the connections others would miss. We don't. We let them think they're succeeding while we get ahead of them. She turned to Ethan. You have connections in those neighborhoods, restaurant owners who trust you. Some, but all, call them. Tell them to evacuate, but make it look like business as usual from the outside. Empty restaurants that look full. When Chen's people arrive with their contamination, they'll be walking into traps. Cole was already on her phone coordinating with field agents. Ethan was calling his contacts. But Rose was writing her napkin, filling with observations, deductions, the kind of pattern recognition that had saved so many lives already. She thought about her mother writing her dreams on napkins, because paper was all she could afford. She thought about Marcus keeping every scrap because he knew they mattered. She thought about table 17, the worst seat in the house that had become the stage for revelation. "Rose," Torres said urgently, "your brother the hospital just called. Someone tried to get into his room. Security stopped them, but—" Rose was already moving Ethan beside her, Cole coordinating protection as they raced back to Mount Sinai. The war wasn't over, it was escalating, but Rose Vance, armed with napkins and truth, was ready for the battle. The elevator rose toward Marcus's floor, each number a heartbeat, each floor a promise that she wouldn't let them win. She'd started this journey as nobody, invisible, powerless. But invisibility, she'd learned, was its own power. The people who thought they could operate in shadows had forgotten that shadows were where the invisible thrived. The hospital security footage showed everything in silent, grainy detail. A man in scrubs who didn't belong, a syringe hidden in his palm, the moment Torres's team intercepted him 3 feet from Marcus's door. Rose watched the playback on Agent Cole's tablet, while her brother slept, unaware of how close death had come calling. "We traced him to Chen's pharmaceutical company," Cole said quietly. "He had enough potassium chloride to stop your brother's heart instantly. Make it look like kidney failure finally won." Rose's hand found Marcus's, careful not to wake him. His fingers were still cool, still too thin, but there was strength there that hadn't existed yesterday. The treatment was working slowly, reversing months of damage. She wouldn't let Chen or anyone else steal that progress. "They're getting desperate," Ethan said from his position by the window, where he'd been coordinating the false evacuations in Brooklyn and Queens. The 3 restaurants they tried to hit all empty when their people arrived. 17 arrests so far. "Desperate people make mistakes," Rose said, but she was thinking about something else, a pattern in the attempts, a signature she recognized. "Cole, can you pull up the employment records for all 17 original targets? What are you looking for? A connection we missed." These weren't random selections. Someone inside each restaurant helped Finch's network. But I don't think they were all willing participants. She pulled out another napkin, began sketching from memory. At the Sterling Cut, there was a prep cook, Elena Castillo, single mother-daughter with special needs. She suddenly had money for treatments about 4 months ago. Said it was an inheritance, but she was lying. Cole's fingers flew across her tablet. Elena Castillo deposited $30,000 in structured payments designed to avoid reporting requirements. The timing matches shipments of contaminated products. "They were buying cooperation," Ethan said, understanding. "Finding employees with desperate situations and making them offers they couldn't refuse. Just like they did with me," Rose added. "Except I was supposed to be both accomplice and victim." She turned to Cole. "We need to protect these people. They're witnesses, but Chen will see them as loose ends." The door opened and Harrison entered, his usually impeccable appearance slightly disheveled. "Mr. Blackwell, the board meeting. They're voting to remove you as CEO. They say your actions have exposed the company to catastrophic liability." Ethan laughed, dark and bitter. "Let them. I own 53% of the shares. They can vote all they want." "Actually, sir," Harrison hesitated, then pulled out a document. "They're claiming your actions constitute a breach of fiduciary duty. They're freezing your assets pending investigation." The room went silent, except for the steady beep of Marcus's monitors. Rose watched Ethan process this, the empire he'd inherited transformed, and was now trying to redeem, slipping away like water through his fingers. "Good," he said finally. "Let them have the poisoned kingdom. I'll build something better." "With what?" Harrison asked gently. "Sir, if they freeze your assets, then I'll start where I should have started, at the bottom. Working in kitchens, understanding what really happens when nobody important is watching." He looked at Rose. "If you'll have me as an employee, that is." Before Rose could respond, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. But this time, instead of threats, there was a single word parlay. She showed it to Cole, who immediately started a trace. "Someone wants to negotiate." "It's Chen," Rose said with certainty. "He knows the legal case is building, knows his network is collapsing. He wants to make a deal." "We don't negotiate with—" Cole began. "Yes, we do," Rose interrupted. "Because there are more victims out there. More poisoned products we haven't found. More people who'll die if we don't get the complete picture." She stood, decision made. "Set up a meeting. Somewhere public, somewhere he can't make me disappear." "Absolutely not," Ethan and Cole said simultaneously. "I'm not asking permission. These people came after my brother. They poisoned me for 6 months. They tried to burn 17 restaurants with people inside." She pulled out a fresh napkin and began writing. "I have questions. Chen has answers. It's that simple." 2 hours later, she sat in Grand Central Terminal's main concourse, the zodiac ceiling, spreading above her like a promise of cosmic justice. The location had been her choice, public enough for safety, symbolic enough to make a point. The Waitress and the pharmaceutical executive meeting, where all of New York's paths crossed. Vincent Chen looked smaller in person, his tailored suit unable to hide the hollow defeat in his eyes. His lawyers flanked him like expensive bookends, but Rose had refused to bring anyone except Torres, who watched from a distance with a sniper's patience. "Ms. Vance," Chen began, his voice still carrying traces of the arrogance that had built his empire. "You've caused quite a disruption. You poisoned 12,000 people. I'd say you caused the disruption." "Allegedly poisoned. My lawyers tell me the evidence is circumstantial." Rose pulled out the butterfly thumb drive, not the original which was in FBI custody, but an identical one she'd bought that morning. "Would you like me to read your emails aloud, the ones where you discuss increasing dosages for specific targets? Or should I skip to the part where you celebrate Judge Martinez's declining health?" Chen's lawyers shifted nervously, but he waved them silent. "What do you want?" "Complete disclosure. Every product, every batch, every target. The antidote formulas for all variations. The names of everyone involved from boardrooms to kitchens. In exchange for nothing. You're going to prison, Mr. Chen. The only question is whether you go as a mass murderer or as someone who helped minimize the damage in the end." Chen laughed, bitter and sharp. "You think you've won. You think stopping 17 restaurants means anything. This is bigger than food, bigger than New York. You've scratched the surface of something that goes back decades. Then help me dig deeper." He studied her for a long moment, this woman who'd brought down his carefully constructed network with napkins and determination. "You know what your problem is, Ms. Vance? You think there are heroes and villains, but everyone's complicit. The customers who demanded impossible prices, the critics who celebrated excess, while workers suffered, the regulators who looked away for campaign contributions. I just gave the system what it was already begging for. You gave them poison. I gave them efficiency. The synthetic proteins were supposed to solve hunger, reduce costs, democratize fine dining. The health effects were an acceptable risk. Acceptable to whom? To the same people who accept that their phones are made by children, their clothes by slaves, their food by workers who can't afford to eat it. He leaned forward. You want to blame me for everything, because it's easier than acknowledging that everyone knew something was wrong and chose comfort over questions. Rose felt the truth of it like a slap, but she didn't flinch. You're right. The system is corrupt. Everyone's partially complicit. But you had a choice to be better, and you chose to be worse. That's the difference. Chen's expression shifted, something almost like respect flickering across his features. You really believe that, don't you? That individuals can change systems? I'm sitting here, aren't I, a waitress who nobody noticed, talking to a billionaire everyone feared. If that's not changing the system, I don't know what is. He reached into his jacket, Torres tensed visibly, and pulled out a single piece of paper. Warehouse locations. 23 facilities across 7 states. Everything's there, products, formulas, distribution lists. My lawyers don't know I'm giving you this. Rose took the paper, her hand steady despite her racing heart. Why? Because you're right about one thing. I had choices. And maybe making one right choice at the end matters. He stood his lawyers scrambling to follow. The 12-year-old girl, her name is Sarah. I have a daughter her age. Tell Sarah's family I'm sorry. Tell them the specific antidote for her exposure is in Facility 7 Refrigeration Unit 3. He walked away before Rose could respond, disappearing into the crowd of commuters who had no idea they'd just witnessed a confession that would reshape the city's understanding of power and corruption. Rose's phone rang immediately. Cole. We have the locations. Teams are mobilizing now. Be careful. If Chen's telling the truth about this going back decades. We're finding things, Rose. Old cases, unexplained illness clusters, restaurants that closed suddenly after customer complaints. This is massive. Rose stood looking up at the constellation ceiling, thinking about patterns and connections. I need to see something. Can you get me the health department records for the last 30 years? Every restaurant closure, every contamination report. That's thousands of files. I'll start with the Sterling Cuts location. That building has been a restaurant for 50 years. Different names, different owners. But what if the location itself is important? 3 hours later, surrounded by boxes of records, in a commandeered FBI conference room, Rose found what she'd been looking for. The pattern was subtle, almost invisible unless you knew to look for it. Every 5 to 7 years, the restaurant at that location would have a contamination incident. Not enough to kill, but enough to force closure, sale, renovation. The property would change hands at below-market prices, then reopen under new management. They've been doing this for decades, she told the assembled team, Cole, Ethan, Harrison, and a dozen FBI analysts. Not just poisoning for profit, but using contamination as a real estate strategy. Force closures, buy cheap, renovate with construction companies they control, reopen with staff they've compromised. The Sterling Cut was built on blood, Ethan said quietly, understanding the full weight of his inheritance for the first time. My father knew. He had to know. Rose put her hand on his shoulder. You didn't. And when you found out, you acted. That matters. Agent Cole's phone buzzed. She answered, listened, her face going pale. There's been an incident at Facility 7. The one Chen mentioned. When our team arrived, it was on fire. The 12-year-old girl's antidote, no. Rose stood so fast, her chair toppled. We need that formula. Sarah needs it. The fire department is trying to salvage what they can, but Rose was already moving Ethan beside her. Which facility? Where? New Jersey, Port Newark. That's 40 minutes. We can make it in 20. Ethan was already calling for his car, the one advantage of wealth he still commanded. The ride was silent except for Rose's pencil on napkin, working through what she remembered of Chen's chemical notations, trying to reconstruct the antidote from fragments of overheard conversations and glimpsed documents. Her mother had always said she had a photographic memory for things that mattered. She'd never wanted to test it with a child's life at stake. They arrived to find the warehouse fully engulfed, firefighters battling flames that reached 50 feet into the night sky. But Rose wasn't watching the fire, she was watching the pattern of smoke, the color of the flames. That's not a normal fire, she said. Those green flames, copper compounds. The purple smoke, iodine. They're not just burning the building. They're destroying evidence at a molecular level. Then it's over, Ethan said. Sarah's antidote is gone. Not necessarily. Rose pulled out her napkin, now covered with chemical equations. The fire tells us what was stored there. The colors are signatures. If I can identify the compounds, I can work backwards to the formula. A hazmat team member approached. Ma'am, you need to stay back. The smoke is toxic. I know. That's the point. She showed him her napkin. These compounds, do you have air quality readings, specific measurements? He looked at her like she was insane, then at Ethan, who nodded firmly. Give her whatever she needs. 20 minutes later, surrounded by atmospheric readings and chemical analysis, Rose had it. Not perfect, not complete, but close enough that any competent chemist could fill in the gaps. This might work, she said, exhaustion making her sway. Get this to Mount Sinai, to Sarah's doctors. Tell them it's a phosphate-binding compound with chelation properties. They'll know what to do. Cole took the napkin like it was made of gold. You just reconstructed a complex antidote from smoke patterns. I had a good teacher, a chemistry professor who liked to explain reactions while eating his steak. I never thought listening would save someone's life. Her phone rang. Marcus. Rosie. They're moving me to a regular room. The doctors say I'm responding better than expected. They're using some new treatment based on information you provided. Something like that. She smiled through tears she didn't try to hide. I'll be there soon. Rose. Marcus said, his voice stronger than it had been in months. I'm proud of you. Mom would be too. After she hung up, she found herself standing apart from the chaos, watching the warehouse burn with all its secrets and sins. Ethan joined her, equally exhausted, equally changed by the last 48 hours. What now? He asked. Now we rebuild. Everything. The restaurants, the systems, the trust. But this time we do it right. She pulled out her last clean napkin. I want to create something. A foundation, maybe. For all the invisible people who see crimes but can't report them. For all the desperate people who get pulled into corruption because they have no choice. The Vance Foundation. No. The Napkin Network. Because the smallest observations written on the humblest materials can change everything. Ethan smiled, the first genuine smile she'd seen from him since this began. I'll fund it. Once my assets are unfrozen anyway. You might be waiting a while. Then I'll work for it. Real work. In kitchens, serving tables, whatever it takes. He looked at her with something deeper than gratitude. You saved me too, you know. From becoming my father. From accepting corruption as the price of success. Agent Cole approached, her phone extended. Rose, it worked. Sarah's responding to the treatment. The doctors are calling it miraculous. Rose sank to her knees on the wet pavement, overwhelmed by relief. She'd done it. They'd done it. Despite everything, the threats, the poisoning, the attempts on Marcus's life, they'd saved them all. But as she knelt there, she noticed something in the ashes being carried by the wind. Paper fragments, partially burned but still readable. She caught one, recognized the handwriting immediately, her mother's. That's impossible, she breathed. Ethan helped her gather more fragments. They were receipts, orders, observations, all in her mother's distinctive hand, all dated from 20 years ago, all documenting suspicious activity at restaurants throughout New York. Your mother was investigating this, Cole said, examining the fragments. 20 years ago, she was doing exactly what you did. Rose remembered now her mother's late nights, the constant writing, the fear she'd tried to hide. The cancer that came so sudden and aggressive right after she'd tried to report something to the health department. They killed her, Rose said, certainty cold in her chest. She found out what they were doing, and they poisoned her just like they poisoned me. Then you're not just finishing your own investigation, Ethan said quietly. You're completing hers. Rose stood slowly, her mother's napkin fragments carefully preserved in her pocket. Chen was right about one thing. This does go back decades, but he was wrong about something else. Individuals can change systems. My mother tried alone and died for it. But I'm not alone. She looked around at the team assembled in the warehouse parking lot. FBI agents, firefighters, hazmat specialists, all working to uncover truth and save lives. Then she thought about Marcus getting stronger. Sarah responding to treatment, 17 restaurants that didn't burn thousands of people who didn't die. We need to make this public, she said. All of it. The decades of corruption, the real estate manipulation, the targeted poisonings. People deserve to know what's been happening in their city. That could cause panic, Cole warned. Or it could cause change. Real, lasting change. Because once people know that the waitress sees everything that the prep cook remembers, everything that the invisible people are actually watching, the powerful will have to be more careful. 3 weeks later, Rose stood in the renovated Sterling Cut, addressing a room full of reporters, survivors, and former employees. Table 17 had been transformed into a monument of sorts, a glass case displaying hundreds of napkins, each one documenting a small act of courage or observation that had helped expose the conspiracy. Marcus sat in the front row, healthy enough to leave the hospital, his new kidney functioning perfectly thanks to an anonymous donor who turned out to be Ethan. The 12-year-old girl, Sarah, was there too, fully recovered, and clutching a napkin Rose had signed for her, "Always pay attention, always speak truth." The Napkin Network launches today, Rose announced, a foundation dedicated to protecting whistleblowers in the service industry, providing legal support, medical care, and safe reporting mechanisms. No one should have to choose between their integrity and their survival. Ethan, now working as a line cook while his legal battles continued, stood with the other restaurant workers. He'd lost his empire, but gained something more valuable, the respect of the people who'd once feared him. Vincent Chen watched from federal custody via a video link the judge had approved. He'd provided evidence that led to over 200 arrests, a cooperation that might reduce his sentence from life to 20 years. His testimony revealed a network of corruption that reached into every major city, every industry where the powerful could exploit the powerless. People ask me if I regret serving that steak, Rose continued, looking directly at Ethan. If I regret not throwing away that first napkin when I noticed something wrong. The truth is, I regret waiting so long. I regret every meal served before I found my courage. She pulled out a new napkin, began writing as she spoke. But regret is just another observation, another thing to document and learn from. So here's what I'm writing now. In every restaurant, in every workplace, someone sees the truth. They write it on napkins, on receipts, on whatever they can find. They are the real inspectors, the real protectors, the real heroes. They just need someone to believe them. Gregory Finch, watching from witness protection somewhere in Montana, sent a message through his handler. Tell Rose the napkin she gave me, I still have it. It reminds me that redemption is possible even for someone who fell as far as I did. As the press conference ended and the crowd dispersed, Rose found herself alone at table 17 with Ethan. The restaurant would reopen next month under new management, a cooperative owned equally by all employees with Rose as the director of operations. You did it, Ethan said. You brought down an empire of corruption with napkins and courage. We did it, she corrected. And we're not done. This was one city, one industry. Imagine how many other invisible people are out there seeing crimes, documenting abuse, waiting for someone to listen. She pulled out her phone, showed him the Napkin Network's website, already thousands of submissions from service workers across the country. Each one a potential investigation. Each one a chance to prevent another tragedy. "What about you?" she asked. "Any regrets about losing everything?" "I didn't lose everything. I lost wealth built on poison. But I gained something better, the chance to build something clean." He pulled out his own napkin, showed her what he'd written, "Excellence with Empathy. Rose Vance teaching position, Blackwell Culinary Institute. You're starting a cooking school. With my remaining legal assets, yes. Free tuition for service workers, focusing not just on technique, but on ethics, safety, workers' rights. Will you teach there? Not cooking, observation, documentation, courage." Rose took the napkin, added her own words. "Yes, but only if table 17 becomes the classroom." They shook hands over the table where it all began, where a billionaire pretending to be nobody met a waitress who turned out to be everybody's hero. Outside, New York continued its relentless pace, but something fundamental had changed. In restaurants across the city, servers pulled out napkins with a little more purpose. Prep cooks documented safety violations without fear. Managers thought twice before cutting corners. The invisible had become visible, and the powerful had learned to fear the truth written on the humblest of materials, a napkin that could bring down kingdoms, expose murders, save lives. Rose Vance, once a waitress who nobody noticed, had become the most powerful person in New York's restaurant industry. Not through wealth or position, but through the simple act of paying attention and having the courage to write it down. And somewhere in the city, in 1,000 different restaurants, other voices were finding their courage, picking up their pens, and starting to write their own truths on whatever they could find. The revolution had begun, one napkin at a time.